Hi and welcome to This Week in Travel. I'm your host, Michelle Robson, and also editor of Turning Left for Less. This week I'm going to be mainly concentrating on Cape Town and the Winelands, how to get there, what to do whilst you're there, and how to use your miles and points to make it cheaper. But first we'll take a look at this week's news. First is some good news in the US. The Senate voted towards overturning the ruling that means that all travellers that are not US residents or citizens must be vaccinated to enter the country. Now, whilst most people are vaccinated, to me it's just another layer of hassle when you're travelling, and really we don't need it now is my view. I think we're long past the point where actually that's effective. So it's good news, but it still needs to potentially be voted on further before it actually becomes law. They are due to review the COVID laws in May anyway. President Biden will be looking at it at that point, but it sounds like he's actually against removing that protection. I think what they're worried about is more in the future, if there was a new mutation, for example, to have a new strain, that they might need to bring things back, and this would make it that much more difficult. So let's see what happens with that. There is also good news with British Airways announcing a new code share with Airlink. That's an airline based in South Africa. Now, you may remember that Comair was a franchise of British Airways that used to operate around South Africa, and that unfortunately went bust during COVID. So now there's a new option if you want to fly on a British Airways code share and earn your Avios and tier points. They fly to lots of interesting destinations in Southern Africa, and it includes Namibia and Windhoek and Walvis Bay. So if you've ever wanted to do Namibia, you can now go on British Airways with that code share via Johannesburg or Cape Town onwards from there. So it's definitely worth looking into that. It's also useful to know that there is another option if you want to get from Johannesburg to Cape Town, for example, like if there isn't a direct flight available or it's very expensive, it hopefully should mean that prices are a little bit more reasonable with that extra option, because it's adding capacity into the system. They do have a business class. They're mainly small aircraft like Embraers. So on most of the E190s, it's a 2-1 configuration for business class, but the seats look pretty good. They look slightly better than a normal economy seat. So actually it looks like a decent product. Also this week, there's some special Valentine's offers, so it's worth having a look at Turning Left for Less if you're after anything in particular for booking travel. There's an Accor sale, which covers brands like Sofitel, Fairmont and Pullman with 20% off. And there's also a really great deal with La Compagnie. Now, they're all business class airlines, and these have pretty much died out now. They're pretty much one of the only remaining ones left in Europe. I've actually flown with them and I really enjoyed it. They're a kind of a low-cost business class in some ways, but actually it doesn't feel like that when you're aboard. It is a 2-2 configuration. That's pretty much the only downside for me. But it's on a small aircraft. It does feel almost a bit like a private jet. There's free Wi-Fi, the food is pretty good, and they're now doing returns for Valentine's for £982, give or take, depending on the exchange rate, and that's from Paris to Newark. So it's worth checking that out. It is a companion fare, so you do have to have 2 people travelling, but you can't really argue with that price. And if you fancy doing something really special, Virgin Red have a special offer on Necker Island. Now, that's Richard Branson's private island in the Caribbean. He does actually live on there and work on there, and he does actually interact with guests that go to Necker Island. So it's really a kind of once-in-a-lifetime experience. And they've got a special offer if you want to use your Virgin Red points. You get a night free. So check out that on Turning Left for Less if you fancy using your Virgin points to do something that's pretty much a once-in-a-lifetime offer. And it's also more details on the Virgin Red app if you want to look into that one. And finally, another good offer, if you're looking to get status, I have talked before about the Marriott offer, which was in a previous show, where it's double status nights for every stay over the next couple of months. But IHG are doing a fast track offer where for as little as 2 nights or 2 stays, you can get a gold status, and there's also one for 5 nights to get platinum status. Now, the only thing I'd say is that although IHG have improved their loyalty program, I still think that it's not that great. You don't get things like free breakfast automatically with status in the lower levels. So it's worth looking into it and thinking, will this actually help me? What am I going to get that's actually going to be worthwhile? You do get things like, potential complimentary upgrade, late checkout, early check-in, that sort of thing, but they're all subject to availability, which kind of makes them a bit worthless. So I think really diamond is the level where you actually begin to get some really good benefits. So have a look at it. It doesn't cost you anything if you're going to stay in an IHG property anyway, like Holiday Inn, Intercontinental, Crown Plaza. If you're going to do that anyway, you may as well sign up and get the status. But I'm not sure that I personally would go and stay specially in one of those hotels just to get the status. But again, you can find all the details on Turning Left for Less. And next I'm going to be looking at Cape Town and the Winelands.
Hi, so I'm here in a slightly blustery Franschhoek, which is part of the Winelands near to Cape Town. It's around about an hour from Cape Town, and it's one of my favourite places in the world. If you're a foodie or a wine lover, you really can't not like it. I'm staying at Maison Cabriere, which I've stayed at twice before. It's one of my favourite properties in the area, and I'll be doing a full review of this at a later date, so keep an eye out for that. It's a guest house, so there's no restaurant, but they have beautiful suites here, a lovely pool, and most importantly, it's only a few minutes walk from the centre of Franschhoek. Franschhoek's absolutely packed with lots of wonderful restaurants, bars, wine shops, boutiques. It's great for a wander around, and there's some really high-end restaurants. Here's at least 3 that I would say are absolutely amazing. So you really must come here if you're coming to Cape Town. If you haven't been to Cape Town, I think you should put it on your bucket list. It's probably one of the favourite areas that I have visited. I come back year after year. It's stunning scenery. It's very easy to get around. It's easy to drive. They drive on the left-hand side of the road, which is handy. And at the moment, it's fantastic value. It's around 20 Rand to the pound, which means that a cocktail or a glass of wine, somewhere really high-end, costs around about £5 at a maximum. A steak somewhere between 10 to 15, again, somewhere very high-end. If you go cheaper, you can even, for example, get a bottle of wine for £8, a whole bottle, in just an average sort of cafe. So it's really great value, and the quality of the food here is really exceptional, thanks to the fantastic climate, the fruit and the vegetables, and particularly steak and the seafood here is really good. And they're actually well catered for vegetarians now. There's plenty of vegetarian and vegan options in everywhere we've been. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how to get here, and then I'll just go through a few of my favourite highlights. So it's quite an easy place in terms of the choice of airlines you can use and using miles on. But the problem is that it's just so popular. When people come here, they tend to fall in love and they keep coming back. So it's something you can't get at the last minute normally if you want to use your miles. Really got to plan ahead. It's what I call a unicorn route. Everyone wants it, and it's really hard to get. So you've got plenty of choices. British Airways fly twice a day in the winter. Virgin fly direct also from Heathrow. And then you've got a few that are indirect. So you've got KLM, which you could use either your Flying Blue points or you could use your KLM Flying Club miles. You've also got Etihad and Qatar as well. And Emirates. So there's a big choice there. Some of those you can transfer from your American Express rewards as well. With British Airways, you really need to book when they release the seats, which is at midnight or 1 a.m, depending on whether it's winter or summer, at 355 days before the flight. You need to be literally on the ball because those seats will all go pretty much immediately. You can do this even with a companion voucher. If you just use your outbound to start off with, you can then add the inbound when that becomes available, and there's no charge providing it wasn't available at the time. And Virgin is 330 days before. So again, you really need to be booking when those seats are released. Otherwise, you can set an alert on something like SeatsBuy or Reward Flight Finder. Occasionally, seats do come up, particularly over the summer in the UK because it's their winter here. However, that is the peak of whale watching season, and obviously vineyards are open all year, and it's still sunny here. It's just cooler. They do have a bit of rain, but it's still a nice time of year to come, and better than sitting at home in the rain in the British summer. So it's worth considering maybe coming at off-peak. The other tip I'd have would be to look at Johannesburg. So that's normally quite easy to get in comparison to Cape Town because it's not really a holiday destination. And there are still flights going between Cape Town and Johannesburg very regularly, and they're quite reasonably priced. Obviously, you need to allow plenty of time between those flights. They're on separate tickets, but it is definitely worth considering. You could also consider maybe stopping in Johannesburg to do something like a safari. So that's worth a try if you wanted to kind of build in some time to make sure that you weren't worrying about missing your connecting flight. In terms of things to do in Cape Town, there's loads of things if you're into wildlife. I mentioned whale season, that's sort of July to October is the peak, but there's some around sort of either end of that. There's things like seals as well, and my favourite, the penguins at Boulders Beach. It's a really stunning beach. It's got white sand, crystal clear turquoise water, these massive boulders in the sea, and all these lovely penguins literally just sitting there. At the same time as that, you can also do Cape Point, which takes you down to the most southern point on the Cape Peninsula, where the two oceans meet, the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean. And some fantastic views here, but watch out for the baboons. They're not very friendly, and they can appear out of nowhere and snatch your drink or food out of your hands, so I definitely steer clear of those. If you're into whale watching, Hermanus is the place to go. There's even a restaurant there that's in a cave where you can actually sit and eat your lunch and watch whales if you're lucky in the distance. So that's something really special. You can go up Table Mountain. There's hiking there, both for the Lion's Head, which is slightly smaller, or in Cape Town, it's on Table Mountain itself. You can go one way on the cable car and then walk back down if you're not feeling particularly energetic, or if you want, you can go both ways on the cable car. So it's easy for any ability. You don't have to be fit. You can just go in the cable car. At the top, there's a walk you can do, some beautiful plants, and the views are just stunning. 360-degree views of Cape Town and Camps Bay and the 12 Apostles. One tip I would say is to try and do this the first day you arrive or the second day, because the weather can change in an instant. When we first arrived, it was terrible weather. And then the day we did decide to go up, the tablecloth, they call it, which is this layer of cloud that goes over the top, started descending. And by the time we actually got up there, we only managed maybe 15 minutes before it was actually covered in cloud. And they also tend to stop the cable car if it gets very windy, which does happen a lot. As you can see, it's quite blowy here. So definitely try and do it early, so you've got some opportunities to maybe go back if you can't do it when you want to. You can get up there quite easily using the hop-on, hop-off sightseeing bus. I recommend doing that as well. It does take quite a long time because it goes around lots of different areas, but it's a good way, perhaps if you can't get in your hotel when you first arrive on an overnight flight, it's a great way to kill some time and really get your bearings and see the surroundings. And then if we move on to the Winelands, we've just done the wine tram today, which I absolutely love. It's an old-fashioned tram that goes through a number of vineyards. There's lots of different lines, so you really need to do your research about where you want to go, which vineyard you fancy the most, and then you buy a ticket, which is an all-day pass, hop on, hop off. Most of them are trams, but there's also some buses for part of the route. So again, do your research if you want to be on the tram. And you get a little sample of wine, and it's just really beautiful. The scenery's stunning. You can hop on and hop off for an hour at each vineyard or longer if you want. We went to Boschendal, which I also really recommend for the picnic. You don't have to sit on the floor. You can if you want. You can have a blanket with these special sort of upright backs that allow you to sit comfortably on the ground, or you can have a table and chairs. You just specify it in advance. But yeah, the picnic's worth doing, and you also need to book in advance for that because it is very popular. There's a lot to do at Boschendal. There's shops, there's obviously wine tasting, there's a butcher's, there's literally everything for a foodie or people that love beautiful gardens. So that's definitely worth a visit. So I'm here at Dieudonné Vineyards, and you can see the amazing view here. Just wanted to talk about something to do instead of the wine tram if you fancy something a bit more personal. So today we're doing something called the hopper service, which is like a driver but without the kind of wine tour stuff that you normally get where they take you to set vineyards. This you can do whatever you like. You can stop for lunch like we have here at Grand Countryside, and it's a great way to do it at your own pace. You can spend 10 minutes there for a quick tasting, or you can spend 2 hours. You just buy a set number of hours, either 1 to 4 hours or 4 to 7 hours, which is enough because it finishes at around 5 in most vineyards. So definitely worth considering if you like to do things at your own pace.
In terms of using your points in Cape Town to stay, it's actually slim pickings, which is surprising for such a major tourist destination in a pretty sophisticated country. But many of the brands are not well represented. I mean, let's take Hilton, for example, because I know a lot of Turning Left for Less readers either have Hilton status or collect the points. There is virtually nothing in Cape Town, unbelievably. They used to have a good Hilton, but unfortunately that's changed brands now. And the only one is the Doubletree brand, which is actually not in a great location. It's pretty much on the outskirts. It's not far from Table Mountain, but for the rest of it, it's pretty much nothing is walkable from there. So it wouldn't be my choice of place to stay. The best brand for redeeming your points in Cape Town is actually Marriott. That's because they took over Protea hotels that were a South African chain. So that gives you quite a few extra properties. The best one probably for most people in Cape Town would be the Westin. That's close to the waterfront, if not actually in it. And it's a good all year hotel because not only does it have a a rooftop pool. It also has an indoor pool, which is quite a decent size. So it's great if you maybe want to go during their winter months, which is actually our summer, to do some whale watching, because it's geared not just for the summer months, which is particularly important. There's also an AC hotel there, which is their kind of very modern minimalist brand, and that's a newish hotel that has a decent rooftop pool, and again is near the waterfront. The one that I've stayed in that was formerly a Hilton is actually the Hyatt, and the Hyatt Regency has a great location right by those colourful houses you might have seen pictures of in the Beaucamp area. So I've stayed there. The pool is a little bit small, but the rooms are modern, and I found it a good location. It's pretty central to everything, although it's not necessarily walking distance, but it's in the centre of Cape Town, so it's easy to kind of get to everything. And Ubers are very easy to get. We had no problems, and they were super cheap, like £2 or £3 for an average sort of city centre journey. So it's good for that sort of thing, and you can literally walk out the front door of the Hyatt Regency and take a picture of the colourful houses or wander around that little district. So I recommend that place to stay. Other than that, if we look at Radisson, there's a fairly new Radisson in the Silo district, which could be worth a look if you want to get your Radisson points or redeem some. And then finally, as I mentioned, the Hyatt Regency, that's pretty much the only Hyatt in the area. So really, Marriott is the best of the bunch, but there's not a lot in terms of redeeming points, unfortunately. And the bad news is, although there's a really great exchange rate, prices for hotels in Cape Town are really expensive. I mean, they're like London prices. So it feels to me there's a bit of taking advantage of tourists there, which I think is a bit of a shame. So for example, this time we stayed in the Table Bay Hotel. I've stayed there before. It is kind of one of the older hotels. It's been there for a long time, and it's a little bit old-fashioned, I'll be honest, but actually I really like it still. It's right on the waterfront, so we had amazing views of Table Mountain every morning to wake up to, which was really spectacular. And it's right on the doorstep of all the waterfront activities and restaurants, and it was very easy to get Ubers because obviously that's a popular area, and handy for Camps Bay also. It's not very far from there, so I would definitely stay there again. But to give you an example, we got a good rate on a discount, but a normal price room was £600 in the peak months, and that to me seems pretty excessive. So you definitely want to be looking for a good deal. Other hotels that I can mention that I've either visited or stayed in, there's the Taj. Now this is really old-fashioned. It's quite grand, as you'd expect from a Taj, but it does feel kind of old-fashioned, not in a good way. So I'm not sure that I would go back. The good thing about it, if you can get a good rate, is it is really central. It's right in the shopping district, so you can walk out the door and walk to lots of places. So yeah, location is good there. I don't think it definitely doesn't have an outdoor pool. I'm pretty sure there wasn't an indoor pool either, off the top of my head. So yeah, it's not one I'd go back to, but it depends if you can get a good price. If you want la creme de la creme, personally for me, this would be the Mount Nelson, but that you're talking about £1,000 a night currently, which is pretty steep in anyone's book. But it is absolutely stunning. It's kind of a pink palace. You walk up this very grand driveway. There's beautiful gardens. There's a lovely terrace. The pool's a decent size. They do the traditional afternoon tea. They have a pianist. Everything you'd expect from a 5-star hotel. But if you don't want to stay there, you can just go for a drink. We didn't bother booking. We just went and sat on the terrace, had a lovely cocktail. It was very reasonably priced, maybe I think £6 or £7, and sitting next to us was Sting. So that's the kind of company you're keeping. So it's definitely worth popping in. You might do a bit of star spotting there. The other hotel that is even more expensive is the Silo. Now that can run to £1,600 a night. Personally, it's not worth it to me. I know it's expensive because there's only 24 rooms, and it is kind of a one-off hotel that you're never going to stay in elsewhere because it is actually made from a silo. But I think in Cape Town, you're out all the time. So why would you need to spend so much on a room when actually you're not going to be in it much? But I do highly recommend you visit, a bit like Mount Nelson. I just normally go to the bar there, the Williston bar. I recommend you make a reservation because although it's quite big, they control who comes in. So I wouldn't turn up unless you've got a booking. And again, it's quite reasonably priced, sort of £5 to £7 for a drink. And they do kind of small plates. So if you've maybe gone out for lunch somewhere, it's a great place to go if you just want more of a sort of kind of snack dinner and a few drinks. And the views from there through those sort of floor to ceiling massive windows are really stunning over Table Mountain as it gets dark. It's great to watch the sunset, and then as the sky turns that dark blue and the stars come out and you kind of level with it all, it really is quite magical. So really recommend visiting that, but maybe not stretching to £1,600 to actually stay there. So that's all for this week. Next week, I'll be talking to Ed, who writes for Turning Left for Less and is a professional pilot. And I'll be talking about my own experience in air traffic control as we talk about some of those frequently asked questions and what a day in the life of a controller or pilot is really like. Join me next week. Until then, happy travels.